Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm Jake Denter, your host, and I'm joined by Pat Voraotsady. Am I saying that right? Hopefully.
You did.
All right, awesome. Um, Pat is from Georgia and has a lot of experience as a small business owner and now in real estate. So I'm excited to bring him on. Welcome, Pat, and thanks
Thanks,
for joining us
thanks,
today.
Jake. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, Pat, I think you have an interesting story. So I don't know, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and you're a small business owner and now transitioning to real estate. You kind of give us a little bit of background of your story.
Okay. So I'm originally from Laos. My dad was military, so we were Vietnam War immigrants. So we immigrated here back in the '80s just because of the Vietnam War, and we landed in we got off the airplane and then we landed in Atlanta and we went across the street. There was an apartment complex. And I think the majority of my people that immigrated from Laos during the Vietnam War, we all stayed in Atlanta across the street from the airport. That's kind of,
Like in one neighborhood, right?
yeah, in one neighborhood, in one apartment complex is usually how it
Wow,
works out.
wow. Okay.
So there was a Southern Baptist group that helped us with when we immigrated here that sponsored
Hmm.
a large group of us, and they brought us here, and I've been here ever since. And I'll say that because I said something about the Southern Baptist Church there. So my parents are Buddhists, and they were always Buddhists, right? But they raised us as Christians because of
Oh,
uh,
really?
the sponsorship that we had there. And they were like,
Wow.
I always tell people it's like that the thing what Gandhi says, right? He's like, so my parents, my dad he was a very educated man. He was a chopper pilot in Vietnam. And then he was like, this is a good group of people. This is a good religion. He said, you should stick with this religion and learn this religion, even though they were Buddhists. They're like, this is the people that you want to be around. So that's our foundation, kind of how we were raised. So,
Wow. Wow, that's
yes.
awesome. So how old were you when you came?
I was probably like one. So I was
Okay,
very, very
cool.
young. Yes. Yes. So
Wow.
so yeah, so that's how we got to Atlanta. That's how we got to Georgia. And I think being an immigrant is your mindset's a little bit different, right? So it's
Mhm.
even though we grew up very poor, we didn't realize how poor we were because we always had everything, and our parents had all like I think my parents has always made minimum wage my entire life, and I never could understand or felt that because I've always had a rich, family. We had 9 people in our family, so it was a large family, and
Yeah.
I think that the richness of family and community and that has always it didn't feel any different, like, we had a wonderful life, we had, and yeah, and I think that goes a long way. I don't think I ever realized that, but I think it goes a long way even though we were extremely poor, but as we kind of move along and went from our apartment, we went to a house, and I've always had a rich childhood, but I think that has to do with family and community, it doesn't
Yeah,
have to do with dollar amount. I think it's just we were always taking care of each other. So, yeah.
for sure. So, I think it's probably more common or more traditional for immigrants to be entrepreneurs. I mean,
It
is
is.
that, do you think that led to you taking the more entrepreneurial route or?
So I think it is, right? So I'm from Laos. So our people they're a smaller amount of people. They're not a lot. You compare to, like Vietnamese and other people that are in the Southeast Asian, which is a lot more, or Chinese or things like that. Like we only have at I think when we first came here, probably like 6 million in terms of population. Now I don't know the numbers now. I would think it's probably around like 8 to 10 probably across the world.
Oh,
But
wow.
you're so right. We as immigrants, our mindset are more entrepreneurial. My people are not as entrepreneur because we just it's I think it's just slightly sub categories of people, but we are more entrepreneur for the fact that the opportunities that we get as an immigrant is a lot less than people that are already in America.
Mhm.
In the terms of like the limited beliefs and the limited mindset, it's like my parents, when for their entire life, they were factory workers. They've always worked in a factory and they've always kind of stayed there. And my dad, who is an extremely smart man, speaks 2 different language and was a chopper pilot back in our country. Here
Oh, wow.
he worked factory jobs. And it's very limited, right? Because you it's another language, it's another country, and so I see this time and time again where whether you're a professional, a professor, a doctor, and things, a chemist, you come to America, you basically start from zero, and it's very hard to kind of maneuver around, I would say, corporate America. So with that being said, a lot of us immigrants turn to entrepreneurship because that's the only path that's going to get us a little bit further, than going the traditional route of corporate America.
Hmm.
So a lot of us turns into entrepreneur, and I think that that's kind of the path that the majority of us take. And if one takes it, the other one follows, another one follows. So yeah. So to answer your question, that's probably why we take the entrepreneurship route.
Oh, I mean, it's awesome. I've always been intrigued by that because, for those of us that are native, we're born here in, the US, that I think a lot of us come from backgrounds where, our parents work W-2 jobs, and we're encouraged to go to school
Yes.
and get a job, right? And
Yes.
not necessarily to take that entrepreneurship route, and to or that we have to, right? Because perhaps maybe we're in a little bit different financial situation, and we don't have to go that route. But
Yes.
I wish I would have. I wish I would have been more encouraged to take that route a long time ago. Instead I'm finding it later on in life. So,
Yes. It's a hard route.
oh yeah, yeah, it's
It's a
not for the
hard
faint
route.
of heart, right? So
Yes.
it is. There's definitely a lot of work into it. It's not an easier route, but I think in the end, it definitely provides a lot more opportunities for you. So, and opens your future up. So, um,
It
I
does.
I
It
just
does.
wish I would have had the guts and the courage to do it a lot earlier. So kudos to you for doing it from pretty much the start. So
Well, thank you. I wasn't always the smartest kid in class, right? So I know I was smart, but I wasn't always the smartest. So I think I've learned to do creative things and figure things out, right? Like I think my motto in life is like figure it out. So I think that's the entrepreneur spirit, right? And then it's and maybe the other part of it, like I've always been a smaller, a person. Like we're not that big and tall. And I think I've learned to being bullied and things like that. I've learned stamina, right? Like I've learned like it doesn't
yeah,
matter what happens, you just keep going. You fall down, you pick up, you keep going. And I think that mindset really helps out in the entrepreneur world because it's you get knocked down, you get hit time and time again, and the only thing you know how to do is just keep moving forward.
yeah, that
Yes,
fighting spirit. So
yes.
it's super important. Well, I mean, tell us a little bit about how your business, how you got into them, and how those got started, and then maybe that transition to real estate, and why are you starting to pick up real estate now? So,
Okay, all right. Well, I when I first got out of high school, I went to a local college, and I lasted probably like a semester, right? And I couldn't figure out. So, my parents could not afford college for me, so I was paying for it out of pocket. So I went to work, and I was paying for it out of pocket. So I was going, like no most community college, right? Like
mhm.
Tuesday, Thursday, and then probably Friday a class. And man, I could not for the life of me, and like I say, I'm not the smartest student, but for the life of me, I could not sit in that class and learn the basics, curriculum that every college gives you, right? Like, okay, you got to start over. You got to take, physical education. You have to take, basic math, basic this. And I just didn't have the patience to sit there and the money. I was like, I'm having to work, and I have to sit here and go through these basic core, curriculars just to get to, the path that I want, the technical skills that I want. I couldn't do it. So I end up dropping out, and I end up getting a job at the Gap, right? It is the Gap store.
Oh yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
And I started working there into getting the role of management. And it's funny because I thought to myself, while all my classmates in school were going to universities and getting their degrees, I thought, what am I doing working, a retail job here and learning? But it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I learned with systems and routine and how to manage people, how to manage systems. And I pretty much just copy and paste that into my small business when I opened up my small business. And to lead up to the small business, at the time I was with my partner, girlfriend at the time, And we always talked about small business and wanted to open up small business. And so you would sit there, we would dream about it, we would talk about it. And she came home one day from the salon and said, "I have this great opportunity. I want to open up, a business." And this lady at my hair salon had this opportunity to for me to buy the salon.
Oh,
And
really?
as crazy as that, I was like, "Let's do it, let's do it." So I'm actually getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. Um, when I was probably 16 or 17, I've always read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? And I love that book. And that's the book that got me started. And I love real estate and I got into real estate. So I actually bought my first house probably in my early 20s. I think I was like 20, 22, around 22, maybe 23. And I bought my first house. I saved up my money. I saved up, I think, like 15 to $20,000. And I told my mom, I'm going to buy a house and I'm moving out. And she's like, "You crazy," right? Like, stop talking that BS. And and then I read that book and I was, I thought I know everything that I could know about real estate at the time, and I was very young. And I saved up that money, and then I bought this big old property. I think it was like 5 bedrooms, 4 bath, 3 stories. And back
Wow.
then, the banks would give you a loan for anything. They're like, "Oh, here's a loan for you. Here's a loan for you." So I was like, I'm, a 22-year-old. Okay, give me a loan. I'll take it. I'll figure it out. And I house hacked. I didn't realize I
Uh,
house hacked. Right? So I got, three of my buddies and my brother. I was like, "Hey, let's, I told my brother, let's buy this house together and let's just get roommates." So we bought this house and we got roommates, and it was probably the best time of my life, right? Like, guys in the house, like it was like a frat house.
yeah, yeah.
That was my first initial, I guess, real estate, a house hacked.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Um, so fast forward, and I then that's when at the time, the story with me and my girlfriend at the time, we decided to open up a salon. So by house hacking and by investing in real estate, there's when you invest in real estate, there's money there, right? So I always tell
Mhm.
people the one thing, and being an immigrant, nowhere in the world, at least the one that I know of, right, where you can say, "Hey, I want to invest in a $200,000, idea that I have there, and I want to put in, 15 or 10 to 15,000, right, like less than 10% to invest in something that's 200,000 because that's how much the house costs."
Mhm.
And I'm saying this from my limited knowledge. Only in America and only in real estate would somebody give you a $200,000 loan for only putting in $10,000. Like,
Yeah.
like, who else would do that? Like, if I tell somebody I had a business plan, they would never give me that. So, with that being said, and over the years, you build equity. So, from that
Mhm.
equity and the money that you have there is how I was able to fund the first small business that we opened up. So, I was able to fund the business. Me and my girlfriend
So did you
partnered.
pull out a loan from your house, like an equity loan to do it, or?
That's correct. Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes. So I was able to buy that first property, not first property, sorry, the first business,
Mhm.
and we started out. We it was a business owner that was tired. It was a tired business owner, and she
Uh-huh.
was leaving. So she sold us the business. We looked at the P&L, and when I looked at the P&L, I was like, "Oh my gosh, look at all this cash flow coming out. I've never seen this cash flow, in my life before." Like, and they still want to sell the business. I was like, if we can get into this and at least work with the existing business, I think we can do something out of it. So my girlfriend at the time, she jumped in first and she started the to work in the salon and was getting some training there. And I was continuing managing. At the time, it was a Banana Republic, store, right, with
Okay.
Gap Inc. I didn't realize at the time how much I've learned by managing other people and by learning the systems and routine of a corporation of a business,
Yeah.
and I would use that to catapult my own small business. So for a couple more months as she was learning, I finally, in my W-2, I finally put in my notice, and then I jumped in. And then everything that I learned, I pretty much copy and paste into our small business. So we took that small business. I think for the first year, we worked every single day but Sunday. Right? We worked every
Mhm.
single day but Sunday from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every
Oh,
single day,
wow.
whether it's
Wow.
one customer through the door or three. And every week, every month, it kind of multiplied, multiplied, multiplied. And that's how we started. That's how we started in our small business. With that salon, we grew that salon to at our top to 10 locations. Um,
Wow.
and then like in anything, there's a roller coaster. It goes up and down, you know. So once we realized that it was something that we can at the time with my limited belief, there's only so much you can scale, right? There's only so much of me, right? When you have 10 locations, I can only go to one location at a time. I can't
Right.
be at 10 locations at a time. So during that time, we have always focused on real estate too. So I think for the first 5 years, we were very spoiled. You know, a lot of it gave us a wonderful life. You know, it gave us a great life. But we've always invested in properties. So for the past 10 years, we've always bought one property a year and kind of worked on it, fix it up, rent it out long term. And to move into the real estate, it was a slow process. You know, it was our belief at the time was like, oh, we're going to build wealth with real estate. But when we actually do it, we're like, wow, this is a slow process. You know, one a year, but it helps. It builds, you know, it builds over the year, but it was a slow,
Right.
you know, what did they call it? The burr, right? The
Yeah.
burr. So we
Yep.
did the burr, and it was a slow process. Um, and and as an entrepreneur, we within while we were still running our business, which we still have at this time, we're still running it. We were opening other business and trying different things. We wanted to figure out how could we grow. So within that time, we opened up a nutrition store, and now we also open up a restaurant. We have a restaurant too for the past few years.
Wow, that's
Um,
pretty broad array of businesses.
it is. Well, you know, failure. We try things, we failed, and we keep trying, right? Um, and then now, what happens during the pandemic was we decided that we needed to pivot and get into real estate full time. So
Okay.
we told ourselves if we can operate a successful small business, we can we can figure out and if we ran real estate like we ran our business, we can make it successful. So during the pandemic, that pandemic helped out so much, I think, for us because it slowed us down. It made us realize, you know, I guess life as a whole, right? How to rethink life and things. So
Hmm.
we pivoted and we made the commitment to jump into real estate and do real estate full time. So when
That
I
is
say we,
awesome.
me, my partner and wife. So yes.
Okay.
So yes. So
So
yeah, so that's where we are with real estate.
yeah, and you mentioned in real estate that you've had a greater focus on fix and flips, right? Is it
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
so in
That
2020 then, is that kind of when you transitioned into that then?
that's I would say that's where the mindset start, but within the past year is when I transitioned into it. So we've always, you know, bought a fixer upper
Okay.
and fix it up and then rent it out long term. And this year alone, you know, is when I decided because we do separate things a little bit. That I decided that I wanted to do fix and flips and kind of focus on fix and flips. So that's where I guess, you know, that's where the commitment in this year is when I started doing fix and flips. Yes.
So have you done a lot of that work in the past or
I have probably like one a year, right?
okay.
So I haven't really in the past. I've never done fix and flip full time. I've never done real estate full time, and so I've done one. You know, I fix it up, and I would either sell it or I would either hold it long term. I actually hold more long term than selling it. And then this year, I made the commitment to say, you know what, let's just sell these properties to work on more properties, right?
Okay.
Um, kind of the you know, you and I talked about the traditional route, we always take everything the traditional route, right? And you put so much money into real estate to start it, right? You got to put in your
Hmm.
20%, you got to put in money to fix it. Well, that money when it stays there, it doesn't go anywhere. It takes a long time. That's a long way to do growth. With fix and
Right.
flips, once you sell it, you know, you get a large chunk of income that comes in. And with that, I think the limited belief that I had back then and now is that I could flip one property and then turn around and turn that flip into two flips, you know.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the strategy that I've started to use. So yes.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about maybe walk us through your first flip and how you found your team, how you managed it. I mean, were you
Okay.
doing some of the work yourself or you completely outsourcing it. So walk us through what that first flip looked like, and maybe tell us like what went well, what didn't go well with it.
Okay. Okay.
Because
So,
I'm sure there's a learning curve, right? So what can we learn from it?
well, I would say, and here's the thing: when you start to take action and you start to do something, right? Like I'm sometimes I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do in life, right? I'm still in that mindset where what am I going to do? What do I
Yeah.
want to do? What am I going to do? I don't think that's ever going to end. But I think once you start moving towards that direction. So how I got started was I actually got started with our small business. So, with having multiple locations, we would have to hire a handyman, an HV guy,
Hmm.
a plumber, right? So as I'm hiring these guys, I've built a relationship with them and say, and so I've
Yeah.
had this Rolodex. Sometimes I tell people I have this Rolodex, and people don't know what a Rolodex is, right?
Oh yeah.
So, but back in the days, it was a Rolodex. So I have
Right.
a Rolodex full of contractors and workers, and once I started building them, I realized that there's a need out there for people who don't have this Rolodex, right? People don't back then you had to go through the yellow pages. And if you know anything about contractors, a lot of contractors they're not good. They're not good at picking up their phone, they're not good
Hmm.
at a lot of things. So you have to chase them down. But once you build a
Yep.
relationship, it kind of helped out. So once I had the relationship of them from working from my small business, I realized that when I started doing the fix flip, I called them and said, "Hey, I need this, I need that." So that's how I got my contractors. That's how I got my workers.
Okay.
So when we bought the first fix and flip, it wasn't a fix and flip. We bought a house that we needed repair. So the guy that we use, we pretty much repaired the house, the long term rental. We fixed it up and we rented it out. So that was a great success. We're like, okay, no, this works. So when we got the next property a year later, we used the same guys. And having those guys, one thing I would say, one thing that I've learned with the fix and flip or with contractors is that contractors, sometimes you find good ones, right? And this is the same thing with like I
Yeah.
guess or people and employees. They're good for a good 2 to 3 projects. And then from there, they either jack up the price on you or they start to their quality have gone down, whether there's a comfort level. So I've learned that they're only good for a few good projects, then you gotta use that Rolodex and keep cycling out, plumbers,
Yeah.
electricians. And I don't know, maybe that's an inside thing, but that's from my experience.
Trial and error
Um,
with each one, right?
yeah, yep. And then after a couple of after a couple of months or maybe a year later, you call those guys back and they do just as good of the job. So I think that's some trick. That's a trick that I've learned. But having a larger Rolodex will definitely help out with the fix and flip. So once I've kind of gotten that down, um, and decided that I'm not going to keep the house that I'm going to fix. I'm going to flip it. We use the same guys, and we kept some of them depending on the electrician and or the window guy, the wall guy, the painters. Once we got our decided to sell to do the first flip, I think I realized that number one, it's a full time job, right? It's a long process. It can take 3 to 6 months. But once you sell it, it's it's great because the margins, I guess, of money is like 20,000, and then from 20,000 you can make from 20 to 40, from 40 to to 60. It just depends. And every single house that you do, it all like the first home one that you get, you're like, wow, I made 40,000. That's great, 40,000. But that took me 6 months to get 40,000. And then what do you do with the house next? So I think that getting every it's you never know what you're going to get in a property, right? It's like stocks investment, right? The first one you can
Hmm.
hit a home run, and then you can get two or three that is not a home run, that it takes forever to try to figure it out. But I think over those trial and error, I think I've learned to stick with what I know, with the areas that I know, with the contractors that I know, and with the work that I know. Because I think
Uh,
you, as I think human beings, we have the shiny object syndrome, right? You want to
oh
either
yeah.
get too big of a house, and sometimes too big of a house doesn't make you any money. Sometimes those little starter homes make you more money than the big houses. So yeah, but yeah,
Probably
just
easier to sell, right?
yeah, easier to sell. Sometimes you don't have to renovate the entire house. You just got to renovate the bathroom and the kitchen. Put a throw a paint outside. Back then and still now, everybody likes white. You just make that white, paint the whole inside white, and you put in everything, and it's just and that just kind of well, that's what people buy.
Well, yeah, those are some good nuggets of information there to, for people that are interested in flipping.
Yes.
What I mean, what did your first flip look like? Are you the one that's like managing
So
the
yeah,
day to
so
day operations, or do you have a partner that?
I would be the GC, right? I'm not licensed, but I
Okay,
would be the
all
GC
right,
because I would I think what I realized and what I've seen is that, if you with anything, I think when you renovate homes, usually the junior contractor with right, like you go to a guy and you want to renovate a home, right? So you renovate a home, that junior contractor is gonna, as a fix and flipper, is gonna charge you for his guys. And if you know anything about contractors, everything is right? Everything is
right, right.
subcontracted. So he's going to go in there, he's going to charge a premium, he's going to make his cut off from it, and he's going to charge you also a fee. I think I've realized that early, that if I want to save money, because we got to figure out how to save money, that I needed to be my own GC. That I
Okay.
could, and with my Rolodex of guys, I've already have all my, my wall guy, my frame guy, my painter, and I think that's where you're able to save money. So, you know, what your question was, sorry, I think I kind of went off there. Your question was, how was the experience of the first flip?
Yeah.
Um, so the first flip would, I think it went pretty smooth, only because I've renovated probably about 3 houses that we kept, long term, using the same, I would say, 6 guys that I have. So it
Okay.
went pretty
So
good.
you had experience. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I had some experience. I didn't realize I had the experience at the time, but I think it's a mixture of. So to answer the question, to make it short, it went very good. You know, um, but I think I had the trial and error of my already small business that I have there, and then also by fixing up using the same similar guys to fix up the long term rentals that we have. So I guess it
Okay.
wasn't too tragic. Yes, yes.
So, and how are you funding these deals? Are you going out getting loans to buy the property? And
So yes,
okay,
originally we got loans to buy the property. So we did the traditional loan, right? So we
gotcha.
so we did the house hack first. We bought all property that we lived in, and then we sold that property as we move. And that, I guess, that would be the first flip, right? It's not really a fix and flip. I guess we lived in it, we fixed it up, then we sold it. That would be the
Yeah.
first experience. Yeah, that would be the first experience. And and then that's through a traditional loan. And then this after that, so the way we operate, and I say we, me and my partner, right? Me and my wife, now but girlfriend at the time. So we actually kind of kept it. We took the advantage of the first time home buyer, right? I take my advantage of the first time home buyer, and then we took the advantage of her first time home buyer. And
Okay.
and I think one thing from the traditional standpoint that people don't realize, that when you buy a home, you can buy your primary home every single year, right? So every single year, you can say, "This is my primary home," and we would buy that primary home traditionally because that's the only way we know how to do it. And then a year later, that's a rental property,
Wow.
and then you buy the next one, that's a primary home. So between us, me and my partner, without being officially married, right? So I have a primary home, and she has a primary home, and we're both first time home buyers at the time. So we took advantage of that. So it's like, okay, take advantage of this first time home buyer, and that's going to lead up to the next one, right? And then to me, I already had a house, so my thing is, I couldn't get the first time home buyer there, which is really cheap. I think it's like 5% that you can do, or different programs that's out there. But I also didn't have a primary home. So, the next year I would buy a primary home, you know, and then the next year she would, buy another primary home, because that home that we already had was a rental. So that's kind of how we got started. And we've always done that while we're operating our small business,
Wow.
which is a
That
slow way, but
yeah.
it worked for the time being. Yes.
Yeah, but if you're going the traditional route, man, that's a great way to go.
Yes, before we learn about, creative financing, and
Correct.
other things, right? And now I'm, now it's kind of it's catapulting, right? It's moving a lot faster. But I think it took us. I'm gonna say, I hate to say it took us 10 years of learning those traditional and old-fashioned ways to realize that we. It's great that we learned that and it's there, but there's a faster. I guess there's a faster path, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I had not thought about that, like doing it, you know, my wife and myself, right? Usually
yes.
when we've gone out and gotten loans, it's we put both our names on there. So we're not taking advantage of that, right? Um,
Yeah, that's I guess that's a tricks and a little loophole, right? I guess they're just trying
yeah,
to be a little bit more creative. And the thing is, you get afraid, right? I was so afraid to buy a house and say, what am I gonna do with this? You know, what am I gonna do with this house if it doesn't get rented or things like that, right? But at the end of the day, I think from a mindset standpoint or a limited mindset standpoint, is that you are not married to that property or you can buy that, and at the end of the day, you can always sell it, right? You can always sell it, right? And with property, you're always gonna either break even or make your money back if you do it right. But at the end of the day, you're not married to any property. At the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you sell it and you get your money back,
yeah.
and you're not really losing, right?
Wow, that's great insights there, and I learned something on that's a way of being creative. You were creative before you even joined Sub too, so there you go.
Well, there's so much to learn. Really, I'm learning so much, and I want to learn more. Like, talking to you, I'm learning. So yes.
So, we're running out of time here. What
Okay.
for our listeners? What major takeaway would you give them of things that you've learned along the path? Maybe one or two key points that you've learned along the way that they should apply in their life, earlier
Yes.
to really help them be successful sooner.
I would say the number one thing is invest in yourself, right? Invest when I say invest in yourself, like people would ask, what does that mean, right? Invest in your self education. I would say
Yeah.
that was the most important thing. It took me a little bit longer, right? I made a lot of, when I said like within a 10-year time frame, and from what I've learned, I definitely, I don't regret it. But I would say if I were to tell my younger self to invest in yourself, to spend the money, to when like growing up, like we learn to go to university, we
Mhm.
learn to to take the traditional route.
Right.
But education nowadays, I think we didn't have this growing up, right? But nowadays you can learn so much through the fingertips of your phone, to Google, to YouTube, and you can learn so much. Take the time to invest in yourself, right? I would say that would be my first one. And then I think the second um, step would be make all the mistakes you can while you're young. Like try it out, do it. As you get older, it's being bulletproof and having that mindset where you can conquer the world when you're younger, that goes away. It dwindles down when you're older, when you have kids. So make all the mistakes that you can while you're young, and and put in the self education. Those would be my top two advice for
So,
people.
I mean, that's fantastic advice.
Yes.
I've recently learned those two things as well. I wish I would have learned them a long, long time ago. Right, go back in time and tell my young self to apply those principles, and you're spot on. I mean, I found that it is important to invest in yourself and to take action and not be afraid to make mistakes. So,
Yes. Yes.
um, I think back when I first started, my career, I was very risk averse and just was like, gotta do everything, by the books, and wasn't willing to take any action and or risk. So,
Yes.
I mean, kudos to you for actually doing that at a younger age. And I mean, of course, you're learning along the way, and wishing you go back even do more.
Exactly, exactly, yes.
Um, man, I have really enjoyed listening to you and your story and what you've shared with us, and I think we can take a lot away um, from your story. And I mean, being both small business and a real estate investor, and well, a real estate investor really throughout the time. But man, it's been a pleasure today, Pat. Any
Thank
parting
you,
words you
yes.
have for us before we
No,
part?
thanks for having me. I think, I would say, also I would add pivoting, right? Like pivoting, like we in like now, after the pandemic, like we thought about a lot about life, and then as we're getting older, like kind of like how do we exit, right? Or
Yeah,
how do we go towards the golden years? And I think pivoting is also another important thing that that I would add, because even now I still feel like I'm starting a new journey, right? And like this year alone, just jumping in and doing it full time is scary. And I think that I've learned that if I put in the work and I put in the work, like it doesn't matter. I can live till my old age, but I still have to put in the work. So I'm excited. Thanks for having me on this show, and I would love to keep this connection and to learn from each other. But I think that putting myself out there in an uncomfortable situation and keep doing it, because I still feel like I'm still learning. I feel like I'm going through a new chapter, and I'm scared. I'm so scared, but at the same time I'm excited. So you know,
Well, I think that's the approach, right? We're always should be learning and growing and changing and adapting,
yes,
right? If we get caught in the same, yeah, we learn a new trick and then we just stay there forever. Eventually, the world's going to pass us by, and we're going to be left behind. So
exactly.
uh, that's great advice to pivot and just constantly be learning and growing. So I think that is part of being successful. So
Yes, I mean, look at us. We talked earlier about us being on a podcast or YouTube, right? Like, oh my gosh, what am I doing on camera?
yeah, I
Right?
know. Yeah, 2 weeks ago I wasn't doing this, so here we go.
Exactly,
We're
exactly,
transitioning. So,
exactly.
um,
Cool. Thank you.
Pat, this has been awesome. How can our viewers connect with you?
Oh, okay, yes. So my last name is right there. So on Instagram is Voraotsady, and you can also find me on YouTube and in my podcast channel, and it's the same there. I think it's YouTube with the last name there. But definitely look me up on Instagram, and I look forward to answering any question and helping anyone that is willing to help. I think you and I spoke earlier about I think giving back, and I think I've
Yeah,
learned that by giving back you bring so much, the universe will bring so much back to you. So that's I think that I'm here to always, I've learned to always give back to to the universe and give back to people. So yes.
awesome. Couldn't agree more. And I will drop your contact info down below for our listeners,
Oh,
and
thank you.
that they can be able to get a hold of you or connect with you. And I would encourage them to do so. I mean, man, this has been awesome. I've learned so much just talking with Pat over the last couple of days, and yeah, hopefully we can continue this relationship, and maybe we can do a follow up here in the future. And because I don't even think we got half the story yet, so still a lot more to share. And as you pivot, right, and adjust, your story's changing.
Yes,
Let's update.
that's awesome, Jake. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks, Pat, and
All right,
take care,
thank you.
everyone.
You too. Thanks.